Welcome back to Acer Bonsai. I'm here with my imported Seigen Japanese maple. The Seigen cultivar is both beautiful for its spring color with an amazing light pink display that hardens off to a beautiful green in early summer, as well as its leaf shape. It's a delicate leaf with slightly elongated, pointed star-like lobes. Such a stunning cultivar, a classic of Japanese maple bonsai. As you can see, it's got some really contorted movement. And that's why I've wired all these branches out. If we have a really twisting and turning trunk line, it's important that our branches reflect that movement as well to create a harmonious design. As the spring leaves emerge and the branches begin to elongate, it is critical that I keep a close eye on these young branches. We have to remain vigilant to protect these delicate branches from wire bite. Any scarring could last for 5 to 10 years, and we don't want to risk that. If you take a look over here on the right-hand side, you'll see there's an extreme amount of inverse taper. Let me rotate around to show that to you. It's quite grotesque, to be honest. I had an idea that I might air layer the entire top of this tree and rebuild it. That would create a stunning little Shohin maple for sure. But I don't want to risk setting this tree back so far. I think the best way forward is going to be doing some carving work on that large lump in midsummer. So we're going to hold off on any action there until later. For now, we're going to do a repot on this tree. I have not seen the root system of this tree since I purchased it last year, so I really need to see what it's looking like. Because we're in the early development phase, you can see that many of these branches are quite young and narrow. We're going to need to thicken some of those up for the final design. So not only do we need to take a look at the roots to see what we have here on this newly purchased tree, I'm going to move the tree into a large wooden box to allow it to gain some strength and vigor. We may do some root sorting as well. Come on in close, let me rotate around the tree and give you a close look at this awesome Seigen Japanese maple specimen. After analyzing the tree, I think that the view that you see there is probably the best front for the tree. I really like the way the roots flare from that angle, and it also accentuates the really beautiful trunk line. On the back side, we have some smaller roots. It looks like the previous owner did some approach grafts here to add these roots in the missing area of Nebari. So we'll take a look at those, and we definitely need to give those plenty of room to run in that wooden box. All right, here's a closer look at our Seigen. As you can see, we have that really grotesque inverse taper area here. I don't know what happened with the previous owner, but that's definitely going to need to be addressed. You can see we've spread out these branches to create some interesting movement, as well as to create photosynthetic efficiency so that we can start developing these branches in the coming season. Up at the top of the tree, there's also some structural flaws. We have the tree splitting at the very top with 2 very strong apexes on each side, so a total of 4. This, I think we can get away with 2, but I'm actually considering removing either both or at least one of these apexes to the right-hand side of the screen. I think we need to get this under control, work on our branching, and build this apex properly. We definitely want to hang on to these fertilizer cups. I just filled these up for spring. I probably should have waited on this tree until after the repotting, but I wasn't sure exactly when I was going to do it. Loosen these tie wires. Got another one over here. Look over here and see if we have anything else. I don't see anything right away. This does appear to be okay. It might be stuck in there. Could be the shape of the pot. Let's lean this back, take a look at the underside of the pot. We don't know exactly how these wires twist, so let's loosen those. Make sure those can, oh, that one's loose. That's nice. Make sure that these can easily come loose. This is a beautiful pot. It's got a nice patina. There's the original potter's mark on the bottom there. I'm gonna have to get that identified. I know we usually recommend using a comma, which is that small hand sickle, but I don't actually own one of those yet, so that's probably gonna be one of the next addition to my bonsai toolkit. So let me just loosen up around the edges. It looks like this pot does have a slight inward curving lip, and that can cause a problem when you're trying to get a tree out of the pot. I don't know how long this tree's been in this pot. Could be root bound, or it might not even need a repot, but I think it's important on a new tree like this that we take it out for a repot, see what we're working with here, so that we can make sure we're taking the very best possible care of it. We may be able to even get it loosened kind of on one side, get that front edge here lifted up. That'll help the entire root ball slide out of the pot. Let's give it another try here. There we go. Great. All right, let's get that up and out of the pot. I want to make sure these wires come out. One more wire. Oh, that one's stuck. Okay, great. There's one more wire there. Let's get that out of there. Unlike some of the trees in our previous episodes, this tree is quite far along in its development, so we have to treat this with a lot more delicacy. As in any repotting, we're going to start by raking out the outer edge of the root ball, encouraging root growth in a nice radial fashion. We don't quite know what we're working with. We've never seen this tree before. After just a few seconds, I've already switched over to a wooden chopstick because it looks like we're working with a really delicate root system here. Looks like this tree was given a pretty hard chop back, probably just a few short years ago. You can see these really large roots coming down, and then they have a bunch of roots branching out here. So until we get this uncovered, we won't be able to tell, but it looks like this is actually a fairly rudimentary root development going on here. When I bought this tree, it seemed nearly impossible to find Seigen anywhere in the United States. So I was willing to pay a premium for the tree, not only because it's a pretty nice looking bonsai, but specifically because I wanted the cultivar so that I could start propagating it. Little did I know that Mr. Maple was going to drop 10-gallon Seigens on their website just a few weeks later. That's okay, I bought one of those too, so I've got a 10-gallon for propagation stock, and then this one I'm going to focus more on developing it into a bonsai and not so much worried about it for propagation stock. Even so, I'm keeping a really close eye on these trees as they leaf out to confirm that they don't have any different characteristics. Sometimes in the nursery trade, we'll find two trees that are marked as the same cultivar, and they actually have quite distinct characteristics. For instance, one might have a slightly different color or leaf out sooner in the spring, or even have a slightly different leaf shape. So it's important to confirm the trees that you have. Even from trusted sellers, mistakes happen. Or even if they've done a really good job labeling their trees, it's potentially not the seller's fault. Potentially the seller received material that was mislabeled, and so they've been propagating an incorrect name. In any case, this is definitely a beautiful bonsai. I've seen photographs of it leafing out in spring with that really nice bright pink Seigen color. I feel very fortunate to have a beautiful specimen like this in my collection. I'm not necessarily going to immediately give up on some of these roots that are going the wrong direction. As we work this root ball down and get it into that training box, I may be able to apply some of those Ebihara techniques and see if I can get these roots to behave a little better. Ebihara was a renowned Japanese maple bonsai grower. He was actually one of the mentors of Mr. Kimura, and we know Kimura-san as the instructor of Ryan Neal of Bonsai Mirai. Mr. Ebihara's techniques for developing roots were pioneering in the Japanese maple bonsai field because he was able to develop exquisite, highly refined Nebari in much less time than some of his contemporaries. So when we talk about Ebihara techniques, we're talking about the careful pruning and organization of radial roots, oftentimes attaching roots to a wooden box to make sure they're growing in the correct direction. To distill that entire technique down, what Mr. Ebihara stood for was taking as much care in the root development as we take in the branch development. You can see we've got a few gaps like here and here, so we are going to eventually need to do some additional root grafting. But for now, we want to sort out all the roots that we currently have and set those in the right direction. As before, I've got a screen down below and I'm trying to capture as much of this bonsai soil as I can so that none of it goes to waste. It looks like we've got some pumice, akadama, and a little bit of charcoal in here. That's a nice mix. Let's take a look at the underside. It looks like they've already developed a really nice flat sheen on this tree. The sheen is just the underside of the tree. It refers to that flattened portion under the base of a bonsai tree. For Japanese maple bonsai, we try to develop a really flat sheen with no roots to encourage that lateral root spread, and that will help develop a beautiful Nebari. This is going to be an iterative process. We're going to trim back these roots, and then we can continue with our chopsticking to remove more of the soil on the underside of the trunk here. Wow, this sheen goes all the way up to the base of the tree. Looks like we're dealing with a little bit of an illusion here. The sheen of the tree is way up there, and it's fully healed over, but most of this Nebari is a big volcano. That's okay, we're going to work with what we have here. This is an artistic endeavor, and I'm okay with entertaining illusion, as long as it's healthy for the tree. Here's a really great example of a root. You can see it's emanating right here. There's another one right over there, real thin roots that are coming from the bottom of the tree. Now, although these might be considered flaws in the Nebari, I'm okay with that. They will fuse in the future, and if we flip the tree over, you can see that thin root is coming out right here. So we can make sure that we have this oriented nice and close up against the base of the tree, and then we can develop this as part of our Nebari. We're gonna let this little root run nice and strong so it can thicken up. In the end, this tree will grow just as healthy, whether it's got a hollow Nebari or a solid rock underneath. The important part is getting all of those roots growing strong in a well-balanced circular fashion. Let's make sure we remember to continue spraying them so they don't dry out. I'm pretty confident with the health of these roots. Before we spray them off with the garden hose, let's trim back some of these very longest roots. All right, we got our tree pretty well sprayed off. Let's see if we can trim a little bit more of the unhelpful roots out of the bottom. Just some of these roots that are clearly growing back into the interior of the tree. All right, folks, we're not at the perfect point, but we've done a really good job of cleaning up the underside of our sheen, and we're ready to get this tree into a wooden box. Here's our wooden box. We used this last year to grow out some rooted cuttings, and we've got some simple tie wires in the bottom. Let me bring you in close so you can see what I'm doing. So I've got the tree positioned in the box, closely approximating the future front of the tree. We have tie wires here just like we would in any other bonsai pot. We want to make sure that we get all of the roots to the correct side of these tie wires so that we can tie this tree in and still maximize the placement of every individual root here. So you can see I've combed all these roots over there to the right, and then I can get this tie wire up and over that larger root. There's a loose area under there. I might be able to get this underneath there so that I don't scar the root. There's a pretty good structure under there, and although we need to securely fasten this tree, if I can do it without scarring any of the Nebari, I think this approach here will be perfect for securing our tree. I'm gonna get it up and over the top of these smaller roots here, grab hold of that and pull that snugly across. That's a nice attachment point. And the other wire here, we need to make sure we get our roots organized to the correct side. And these are all going to be nailed in place. All right, we know our wire needs to go up through there. In this case, I'm going to come over the top of this large root here, and I'm going to be as careful as I can to make sure we don't damage it. All right, that's nice and snug. We're going to do the same thing here, and for this I'm going to try to see if I can get this wire back over behind this large root here. And yeah, we're going to need to come over the top of this root there to secure that down. And this one here, so we need to find an optimal entry point for this tie wire without disrupting any of our precious roots. Even these little fine roots like that, I want to make sure I get them in the right spot. All right, a few more here. Let's get those up and over the top. And this area here has got a little bit of dieback on it, so I'm going to try to take advantage of that as an attachment point. If I can come behind this strange root that'll probably get removed in the future, it makes a nice little hook, and that's going to be a great first point for securing our Nebari. Twist our wires here. All right, folks, that is really well secured. One more little twist with my gin pliers here. On both sides, lift and twist, lift and twist, lift and twist. All right, that's looking great. All right, folks, we're going to go section by section. Come in close and follow along with me as I apply Ebihara root techniques to develop this Nebari. I'm starting over on this side of the Nebari because, as you can see, a lot of these roots are extremely compressed. These were pushed right up against the side of the bonsai pot. It caused most of them to grow out and away from the sides of the bonsai pot rather than growing radially in the direction that we want. This area needs the most work, so let's start by getting some of these roots organized into the correct locations. The technique's pretty simple. I usually use a chopstick, and I start from my center point, and I start working on the thickest, hardest to move roots first. So you can see I'm using this chopstick to orient this root out into a lateral position, and then I'll use a nail to secure it. By taking this nail at an angle across the root, it'll help pin it in a downward position. These don't need to be nailed all the way into the board, just enough to hold that root down. You can see we've got it going in a nice, perfectly straight lateral orientation down into the wooden box. This will continue to ramify as it heads out here into the corner of the box. Here's another nice root here. Let's get that pinned into position. Now, although these largest roots are the most important for beginning this technique, we never know where the tree is going to push energy. Oftentimes, even a medium or smallish root will end up getting all the energy from the tree and can grow even faster and can even outpace some of these larger roots during the growing season. So any of the roots that are important enough to keep in the design of our Nebari are important enough to pin into a correct location. Here's an example of a root that's not bad, but it's growing in an upward direction and it's too short to really pin down into position. I'm going to go ahead and remove it. Here's another root. It's actually coming from this point over here, but it's got a sharp bend in it. It grows out to the right this direction and then sharply turns to the left. So we do want to pin this out, but possibly not quite as far as it seems like it should go. As you can see, now that we have a few of these roots pinned, we've got these nice pre-built areas, and I can take a smaller root like this, and all I have to do is bend it over the top. I don't need an extra pin to secure this root. In areas like this, where the roots are fairly well organized, there's no need to add nails. Let's continue working around the perimeter here. We've got these smaller roots that we're trying to grow thick into this area. We're going to allow a lot of these to run as long as they want in this box. So it's important that we reduce any of these side roots that are pointing right into their direction. Some of these roots growing straight up. Let's redirect those back down. You can see here, even just pushing down on this wire is going to help bring that down into the correct orientation. This root here has got some good potential, but it's quite high. We might be able to just tuck it down underneath some of these other roots and get it down where we need it without adding nails. Over here you can see we got a really long root heading straight across the Nebari. Clean up this knobby section a little bit. Make sure we're encouraging roots to grow downward. This root here is coming out at a funny angle, but still has good pliability. It's a great candidate for a nail. This root needs to be bent downward. I'm going to feed a wire up through this drainage hole, like so. I'm just going to bend it over on the bottom, and we can push that wire down. So this wire is actually nice and loose. It's hooked under the bottom. It's pulling this root down into the position we need it, but it's still quite open, and it's going to allow the roots to grow naturally. While I'm at it, I'm going to use the rest of this wire to divert that root down. So we sucked this side root right down into place. You can get over into this section. These two large roots are sending off a profusion of side roots, and they appear to be somewhat fusing here in the middle, so I don't think that's going to be much of a problem. I think in the coming years those will all fuse together. I got this little root from the bottom. I fed it up through this hole. Hopefully we can encourage that to grow, and maybe it'll get nice and strong and start filling in that gap. We finally reached the opposite side of the tree. This was the other narrow side of the pot. So some of these roots over here are compressed as well. It's not as bad as it was on the other side, so that light pruning was most of the work of getting these growing in the right direction. One little root over here I need to get moved. Rotating around, you can see we've got a lot of roots back in here coming off the back. Okay, here's a nice strong root. We need to get that right over here in the middle of the gap. I just used this bigger screw here to get that large heavy root moved in the correct position. All right, we've got some more of these really tight roots here. Let's get these nailed over into position. See, we've got this little root growing back down into the interior. It's obviously growing the wrong direction. But what I see this as is in the future it'll just swell and start to help fuse this area here. For now we'll leave it. In the future we can trim the bottom of it off. All right, we've made it around to the other side of our tree. That gets us in a really good position. Next thing we need to do is get akadama up underneath the base of the tree. Start with a small pile and begin by slowly working it up in there. Now that I've got some soil up underneath, I think I can pause for now. These gaps are much higher than most of the roots, so I can fill in the soil line, and then I can start adding akadama to backfill and make sure I pack it really well underneath the sheen of the tree. All right. The tree's really firmly secured in here. I've got that akadama packed in there really nice. Let's make sure we're pushing on it from all of the sides that have open gaps. Accidentally bent this branch a little bit. Sorry, guy. We are going to add a thin layer of fine akadama for humidity control. All right, let's get our tree watered in. All right, folks, I'll see you in a few weeks after the leaves start to flush out.